Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Way Wednesdays virtual Midrash. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp. And today we are going through Terumah, the offerings. Okay, now Exodus 25 through 27, we get into some of the so called weeds. Okay, we get into some of these laws. And I know that it's often easy to skip over this stuff, but we're going to find some cool stuff in here. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm looking forward to it as always. I want to remind you that we are going to Israel in 2024. And guess what? You are so much invited to come with us because it's going to be a fantastic trip. If you've never been, I strongly recommend that you start saving up your shekels and really try to go with us. You're going to be amazed at all the things that you're going to learn. You're going to be shocked, like, wow, I didn't realize that the Holy Land had all this really cool stuff. Of course, it does. So let's get going. We will get into our study for today, and we'll have a bunch of fun. All right, there we go. So then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they bring me an offering. That's the word truma. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering. Now, this is super duper important, right? God is not demanding anything from us. What does God need from us? Let me think here. Wait a second. I'm doing the numbers, crunching them. Nothing. That's right. He doesn't need anything from us. He's self-sufficient. He owns everything. The cattle on 1,000 hills are his. So he doesn't need anything from us. But what does he desire from us? He wants a relationship from us, right? I mean, if you've ever had a relationship, do you want the person to be forced at gunpoint to love you, or do you want them to genuinely love you? Well, of course you do, right? You want them to want you just like you want them, right? And God wants us. We know that. It's very clear in Scripture. And he wants us to want him in return. And so we can give things to God, not out of compulsion, not out of obligation, but freely, right? A free will offering, right? He's doing it willingly in his heart. God isn't like, you got to give me this or else. Nope. This is on you. So if you want to give, then give. If you don't want to give, then don't give, right? Don't think that, well, I threw $10 in the plate, and so now therefore God has to give me this. You're kind of upset about it. Just don't do it, right? Just keep your money. God isn't in need of your money. But if you want to give to something, whether it's your church or whether it's a mission or it is feeding the poor and the hungry, whatever that may be, all right? And there are other things besides that. Maybe you get involved with giving out wheelchairs to people that are in need. Hey, that's a great thing to do. Maybe you go and you build toilets in third world countries. That's wonderful. Or you build wells, or all kinds of things. There's ways that you can give, right? And when you do it willingly, there is a reward that comes with that. So don't feel like you have to give and that God is somehow ordering you to give, right? He's just not. All right. So just, keep that in mind, right? So this is what Paul tells us on the same idea. He says, this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one gives as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always having all sufficiency in all things may have an abundance for every good work. All right. So, and of course, he proof texts this. As it is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. All right. So you do your part, but do it with a happy heart. Right. And if you really can't, then just don't give, because you're not going to get any special brownie points because you did it. And even though you didn't want to, and I gave anyway. Well, you shouldn't have given, right? Because it's not going to have a blessing attached to it. It's just not worth it. All right, let's go back to our text. So, and this is the offering which you shall take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Now, notice here, there are certain things that God needs. If you're going to give, then there are things that are needed, and there are things that are not needed. It doesn't say just bring some random sticks. I'm going to go and bring some random sticks. And those are not needed for this particular purpose. So keep in mind what you're giving to. Make sure that you are giving whatever is appropriate. Now, maybe it's cash. That is almost always appropriate when you're giving. But there are other things that you can give as well, right? Sometimes you can give money, right? Again, that is a very universally accepted donation type thing. But sometimes it isn't money, right? If you go to hospice, do the people there need more money? No, they most certainly don't. They need someone to just be with them and the last days, hours, whatever, months of their life. They don't need money at that point, right? Sometimes it's just your time, it's your presence that people are in need of. There's a lot of things money cannot buy. Peace of mind, right? A friend, sometimes being a friend. I had the privilege of spending a year in Bolivia, and I didn't have any money to give, but I got to go and give my time to the orphans in Bolivia. And as I look back on that, I thought, I didn't have anything financially, materially to give, but what I did give, I gave. That was my time. Now, I also got to build a playground, and somebody came along and donated the money for me to build a playground, right? So that was really exciting. So I got to use some of my own sweat equity to build this thing that I hope endured for many years. But beyond that, I got to give my time and just be a big brother to these orphan kids. And that seemed to be the biggest gift I could possibly give. What was I giving essentially? Love, right? It wasn't about money. It was about love. And it was amazing as I look back, and not to say life was easy for them by any stretch of imagination, but they were generally happy with very little. All right. And sometimes we think, I just have to give more money. It's not always about money. Money is a very useful tool, but it's not always about money. And sometimes just going and giving of your time is so incredibly valuable. So consider what it is, right? And give what is appropriate to the need. All right. And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Now, why can't God just hang out among them? Well, the word here for sanctuary, mikdash, as it's written in the English, right? Like sancto, right? Something that is saintly or sanctified, set apart. Why does God need a set apart place in order to dwell among us? Well, if we go back a few chapters, remember in chapter 19, God came down on Mount Sinai. And remember what was happening there? It was quite the light show, right? God came down on the mountain, and there was fire that was burning the mountain, right? It was just, this thing was like getting smoked and charred because God's presence came down. And people were like, we can't do that. We can't go up. And so only Moses went up. And he even said, don't let anybody else come up or they'll die, right? That God's fire would break out amongst them. So God truly does want to live among us, but we are incompatible with God. Why? Because we are fallen. And what does that mean? It means that we're decomposing, we're degenerate. And I don't just mean degenerate in our morals, but we are degenerate in our flesh. We're literally falling apart. Don't believe me? Just wait a few years. You'll see. You start falling apart, and you are falling apart at the seams. Okay. And if we get too close to fire, well, you can do an experiment if you want to. I don't recommend it, but get close to a fire and get a little closer and see what happens. It's not very pleasant, right? It becomes very painful. So when we get too close to God's fire and electricity, boom, right? Bad things happen. That's what happened to Nadav and Abihu, right? That hasn't happened yet in our journey through the Torah portion, but that's going to happen in the book of Leviticus, that they went in with strange fire, and they were the ones who were working in this holy place, and they didn't follow the rules. And it wasn't that God was just kind of ticked off at them. No, it's that God is a consuming fire. And if you get too close, watch out. You could be in big trouble. It's no different than if you work around electricity. The electricity doesn't like you and it doesn't hate you. It's neutral. It is what it is. And if you don't handle it properly, it will kill you in an instant. Right now, if you use it properly, it's an incredibly powerful tool to do all kinds of great stuff, right? And we're thankful for electricity. But if you don't handle it properly, it will kill you in just a moment. So God says, according to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits shall be its length, a cubit and a half its width, and a cubit and a half its height. Now, so a cubit was anywhere from 18 inches up to 24 inches over, the hundreds of years. But right here, we're talking about, of course, Moses' time, right? And Moses came out of Egypt. So I am well convinced that Moses was using the Egyptian royal cubit, which was 20.63 inches. That would have been the standard measure in his day. So that's the cubit that I use when I'm looking at the measurements that are given to Moses. But anyway, and you shall overlay it with pure gold inside and out. You shall overlay it, and you shall make on it a molding of gold all around. Why gold? Is God just, it's got to look really pretty? Well, gold does not decompose, right? Gold, it's called a precious metal because it doesn't tarnish, right? Now, silver, it does tarnish, right? And of course, as we go down in value, we see that these things tarnish. But gold is amazing. It doesn't tarnish. It doesn't rust, right? It just stays gold, right? So I would suggest that gold is the metal that's needed to protect the Ark of the Covenant, right? Because God's manifest presence is going to be there. You're going to need something that is able to endure, to withstand that incredible amount of fire. You shall cast 4 rings of gold on it, or for it, and put them in 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on it one side and 2 rings on the other side. And you shall make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. You shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I will give you. All right, so God knows that this is going to be needed. Of course, eventually we're going to have the manna that's going to go in there, and we're going to have Aaron's rod that budded. These are going to be testimonies. And of course, we'll have the 10 commandments, right? Those are the things that will go in there. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and a cubit and a half its width. Now, the term mercy seat, I think it's not terrible, but it's not really what Scripture is saying. The word here is kapot or chapot, right? Kapot. Ve'asita chapot. So this is the word from kafar or kippur, right? Yom HaKippurim, right? If you've heard of that, right? The day of Yom Kippur. What does it mean, Kippur? It means to cover. It's the day of coverings, right? So you're not going to make a mercy seat. You're going to make a lid, basically, a covering. That is, I really believe, the better translation than mercy seat, because I don't know how King James, New King James, I don't know how they got that term, unless, of course, they were thinking that Yom Kippur had to do with atonement, which sort of is a mercy idea. I don't know where they really got that idea, but I think kapot just is a much better, it's much simpler just to say a covering, because that's literally what it is. All right, you got this box, put a top on this thing. All right, that's what he's saying. And you shall make 2 kruvim or cherubim of gold, of hammered work. You shall make them 2 at the ends of the mercy seat. Now, this presumes that you know what a cherub looks like. Now, we don't have so much good record of what these things look like, though by the time we get to the book of Ezekiel is going to have a vision where he has the kruvim. Now, what do these kruvim actually look like? Well, let's take a look and see, because they're pretty weird, quite frankly, when we start thinking what these things are. Okay, so here is Ezekiel. He's got this vision, and he says, he sees these creatures coming, and it says, this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings on their four sides, and each of their four faces, they had four faces and wings. All right, now he then tells us what these four faces are. As for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the four had the face of an ox on the left side, and each of the four had the face of an eagle. Interesting. Now, when we look into ancient history, we do find creatures that are chiseled into stone and put into cylinder seals, etc., that are reminiscent, very reminiscent of these creatures. All right. So the ancient world was not ignorant of what these Kruvim looked like. All right. They're relatively, we don't know what these entirely look like. We have ideas, but it's hard to, imagine four faces, right? You got a square head and a face on each side. I mean, I don't know, right? That seems to be what's going on. You have a square face and a face on each side, a square head. So that's what the Kruvim were, and these are to be on either side of this mercy seat, or of this covering that is going to cover the Ark of the Covenant. All right, and so he says, you're going to make these Kruvim of gold, hammered work. You shall make them at the two ends of the mercy seat. Make one cherub at one end and the other cherub at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the two ends of it of one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim shall stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and they shall face one another. The faces of the cherubim shall be toward the mercy seat. Now, in Isaiah chapter 6, there we see that there were some seraphim, and what were they doing? They were saying, holy, holy, holy. I believe that seraphim and cherubim are exactly the same thing. So the seraphim, or saraf, or safim, it literally means burning ones. And as we looked in Ezekiel chapter 1, we got this vision of these cherubim, and they were fiery, right? There's fire all around them. So I think really the seraphim is just a descriptor of what a cherub is. All right, it's they're fiery ones. Now, the only difference between them is that we see in Ezekiel chapter 1, they seem to have four wings, and Isaiah chapter 6, they have six wings. I don't know quite how to account for that. However, let me just throw this out there, that if we go to Revelation chapter 4, we see the same creatures, and we see that they are saying the same thing that they're saying in Isaiah, which is holy, holy, holy. However, in Isaiah or Revelation chapter 4, they have the appearance of the cherubim, which seem to have four wings, right? So this is the conundrum, and I just can't figure it out, right? So it says the first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like a calf, the third living creature had a face like a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. The four living creatures, each having six wings, were full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, holy, 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 right? So they totally look like the cherubim that Ezekiel saw, which had four wings, but they say the very thing that Isaiah heard them say, where they had six wings. So again, I don't know how to resolve that discrepancy. I'm sure there's a great answer. I just don't know what the answer is, right? If you know what the answer is, put it in the chat and let me know, because I would really like to hear if there's a great answer. But I am convinced that they are exactly the same creature. There's no difference whatsoever. All right, let's get back to our amazing text, because there's a lot of fun stuff in here. So the cherubim, they're stretching out their wings, and he says, you shall put the mercy seat on the top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim, which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. Now, what an incredible promise, right? That God has promised to be here. He's promised to be at this place, right? So that this is not just an empty temple, a dark room. Oh no, this is the vibrant, electric, fiery God who has his manifest presence in the Holy of Holies, and the priest can go in there with the blood, but not merely just to take the blood in there, but to speak with God, right? God is there, right? That is what is so incredible about this. Now, this is what has happened to Zechariah, John the Baptist's father. He went in. It was his turn to minister in the Holy of Holies, and he came out having seen an angel. And well, he didn't believe, and so he was mute for a while. Now, something interesting happened at the end of the first temple period. In Ezekiel chapter 8, God takes Ezekiel by the lock of his hair in a vision, and he takes him over to Jerusalem. And he takes him to the temple and says, "Hey, take a look in there." And what happens is he, he says, "Look what they're doing, Son of Man, some pretty bad stuff," right? And he's like, "Oh boy, okay." And then what happens? Then what happens is in chapter 10, it's, I think, one of the saddest passages. It says that the presence of the Lord went out from the temple, and he went up to Mount Scopus, literally, which is right next door to the Mount of Olives. And he went up and he left. The presence of God left, right? That is a sad, sad day. And yeah, I don't know. I just, oh boy. So definitely a sad, sad day when that happened. But the idea was that the presence of God would be there for the people, and He would be in their midst. You shall also make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its width, and a cubit and a half its height. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, and make a molding of gold all around. And you shall make for it a frame of handbreadth all around, and you shall make a gold molding for the frame all around. And you shall make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings on the 4 corners that are at its 4 legs. The rings shall be close to the frame as holders for the poles to bear the table. And you shall make the poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold, that the table may be carried with them. You shall make its dishes, its pans, its pitchers, and its bowls for pouring. You shall make them of pure gold, and you shall set the showbread on the table before me always. You shall also make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be of hammered work. Its shaft, its branches, its bowls, its ornamental knobs, and its flowers shall be of one piece. And 6 branches shall come out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side. Well, of course, this is a menorah, right? I think you've probably all seen a menorah. If you haven't, you should Google it really quick, what a menorah looks like. But a menorah is the classic, thing that we use to identify. In fact, if you can't remember what a menorah looks like, I have one right up. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right there. Okay. Oh, got it. Okay. Right there. So there's the menorah. And people sometimes ask me, what does that say? Does it say something? Yes. It actually says Yeshua. So for Yeshua's name is in the Way congregation's menorah, right? It's kind of cool. I didn't think that up, but that was our former associate pastor. He came up with that idea. I thought it was pretty cool. So that is what a menorah is. Of course, ours is kind of stylized, but that gives you the basic idea. This would be the standard lamp that you would, of course, always find in the temple. 3 bowls shall be made like almond blossoms on one branch, with an ornamental knob and a flower, and 3 bowls made like almond blossoms on the other branch, with an ornamental knob and a flower. And so for the 6 branches that come out of the lampstand, on the lampstand itself, 4 bowls shall be made like almond blossoms, each with its ornamental knob and flower. And there shall be a knob under the first 2 branches of the same, a knob under the second 2 branches of the same, and a knob under the third 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that extend from the lampstand. Their knobs and their branches shall be of one piece. All of it shall be of one hammered piece of pure gold, and you shall make 7 lamps for it, and they shall arrange its lamps so that they give light in front of it. And its wick trimmers and their trays shall be of pure gold. It shall be made of talent of pure gold, with all these utensils. And see to it that you make them according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain. Now, where did they get all this gold? Well, remember, they plundered the Egyptians when they left Egypt. So that's where they got the gold. Egypt was rich in gold. I mean, they had a lot of gold. And so there was just a lot of gold in various households. And when they left, they took the gold, right? So God definitely plundered the Egyptians, and they got the money back essentially that they, had not been paid for all this amazing work that they had been doing for so long. So that's that. And you might say, wait a second, this is all kind of boring stuff. Why do I have to read about this stuff? Now, yeah, on the one hand, I agree with you. This is kind of like reading a recipe book, right? It gets a little bit boring, or reading some schematics. But on the other hand, there's another way to look at this, and that is to understand and remember that what we're reading is a copy of the heavenly tabernacle, the heavenly temple that's up there, right? So everything that we're reading about is a copy of that which is up in the heavenly temple. That's pretty cool. And of course, Jesus took his own blood there, not the blood of bulls or calves or goats, but his own blood, and he offered it once and for all on the altar up there, right? So that's what makes this really cool, right? We're not just reading a recipe book, but this is a holy recipe. This is a heavenly recipe of what is up in the upper temple, if you will. All right, chapter 26. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen in blue, purple, and scarlet thread. With artistic designs of cherubim, you shall weave them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have the same measurements. 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and the other 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another. And you shall make loops of blue yarn on the edge of the curtain, on the selvage of one set, and likewise you should do on the outer edge of the other curtain of the second set. 50 loops you shall make in the one curtain, and 50 loops you shall make on the edge of the curtain that is on the end of the second set, that the loops may be clasped to one another. And you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and couple the curtains together with the clasps, so that it may be one tabernacle. Now, there are people that get into numbers and say, well, 50 is a significant number. Maybe it is. I'm not aware of why 50 was the number that was chosen here. It could be very significant. I don't know. Now, it is interesting that when we talk about Pentecost, right? Pentecost is 50 days. So maybe there's something there, right? In that number 50, right? 50 from what? 50 from the Feast of First Fruits, right? And of course, we know that's the day of the resurrection until the giving of the Holy Spirit. If we're talking about the New Testament, if we're talking about the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, then of course we're talking about a day that really wasn't established very clearly, although it could have been, it very well could have been associated with the crossing of the Red Sea. All right, it's just something to keep in mind. I don't know that we're given that exact number, but we know that they leave on Passover, and then first fruits is going to be the day after the Sabbath. After the regular weekly Sabbath, it's going to be the first day of the week, right? So I don't know that I can prove that, but I think we're in that basic time frame. So pretty interesting stuff, right? Of course, that's when they're saved. That's when they are delivered, and that's when they're baptized, is on that moment. So probably that happened at the time of first fruits, and then they're given the law. They're having this marriage contract with God at Pentecost, or Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. So it could be that there is something in that number, but I don't know, right? And I don't want to tell you something that I don't know. I see a connection, but I don't know if that's the right connection. Could be, might not be, right? So I don't want to make something up out of thin air, all right? But it is an interesting connection. You shall also make curtains of goat's hair to be a tent over the tabernacle. You shall make 11 curtains. Why 11? I have no idea. Okay. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and the 11 curtains shall have the same measurements. And you shall couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves, and you shall double over the 6th curtain at the forefront of the tent. You shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain on the second set. You shall make 50 bronze clasps. Put the clasps into the loops and couple the tent together, that it may be one. The remnant that remains of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remains, shall hang over the back of the tabernacle, and a cubit on one side and a cubit on the other side of what remains of the length of the curtains of the tent shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle, on this side and on that side, to cover it. You shall also make a covering of ram skins dyed red for the tent, and a covering of badger skins above that. And for the tabernacle, you shall make the boards of acacia wood standing upright. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a cubit and a half shall be the width of each board. 2 tenons shall be in each board for building or binding one to another. Thus you shall make for all the boards of the tabernacle. Again, I get it. This can get to be a little bit monotonous kind of stuff because we're just talking about what is needed to do this, right? So again, not everything in Scripture has to be, this mountaintop experience, but sometimes when we look in the details, you're like, okay, they're making a copy of that which is in heaven. This is, of course, a portable copy, so they can carry it, they can break it down and take it with them to the next location. So, part of that is probably just very practical that God had to give them directions to build something that could be, taken down, folded up, and then put on a cart so they could take it to the next place. And you shall make the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards on the south side. You shall make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under each of the boards for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, the north side, there shall be 20 boards. And there are 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under each of the boards. For the far side of the tabernacle, westward, you shall make 6 boards. And you shall also make 2 boards for the 2 back corners of the tabernacle. They shall be coupled together at the bottom, and they shall be coupled together at the top by 1 ring. Thus it shall be for both of them. They shall be for the 2 corners. So there shall be 8 boards with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under each of the boards. And you shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the far westward. The middle bar shall not pass through the midst of the boards from end to end. You shall overlay the boards with gold, make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlay the bars with gold. And you shall raise up the tabernacle according to the pattern which you were shown on the mountain. Now, this is where we come to Hebrews 8. Right. And this is what it says, who served the copy and the shadow of the heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. For he said, see that you make all things according to the pattern shown to you on the mountain. Right. Because these are this is a copy. This is a copy of that which is in heaven. Right. So I don't think the building materials are a copy. I don't think the distribution of breaking it down was necessarily a copy of it in heaven, but you have this edifice in heaven, and now you have a portable edifice here on earth. You shall make a veil of woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen. It shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. The veil. What is the veil all about? Remember, there is a veil between heaven and earth. Right now it exists between heaven and earth. We find that in several places in Scripture where Ezekiel was sitting by the river Chebar, and then it says that the heavens were open. We see at the baptism of Jesus, the heavens were open. Then we see at the stoning of Stephen, the heavens were open. And then in Revelation 19, John said, I saw the heavens open. So that's what the veil is all about. Also in Isaiah chapter 64, he says, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down. We see in Revelation chapter 6 that the sky is going to recede as a scroll when it's rolled up, right? So we see this veil going away. And even in Isaiah 25, it says that the veil that is over all nations, that's going to be taken away. So there's a veil between the 2 domains, and that is literally protecting us from God's fiery presence. Just like the veil here in the tabernacle would have protected those on the outside, right? On the outside, they were protected so that they couldn't get zapped, right? So if you went inside there, you had to be very careful and circumspect about what you did. And that was the job of a priest, to be very careful and to do it according to the book, which Nadav and Abihu learned the hard way, sadly. All right, it says, you shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of the acacia wood overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be gold upon the 4 sockets of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps. Then you shall bring the ark of the testimony in there behind the veil. And the veil shall be a divider for you between the holy place and the most holy place, right? So you have sort of the clean room, and then you have the ultimate clean room. Okay. You shall put the mercy seat upon the ark of the testimony of the most holy. You shall set the table outside the veil and the lampstand across from the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south, and you shall put the table on the north side. Now, I've had an opportunity to go in a reconstruction of the tabernacle, and it's truly an incredible experience. You really get the sense of, this is really interesting. There's something going on here. What is it that God is essentially telling us? Well, he wants to have fellowship with us, right? There's this 7 candle menorah, or 7 lampstand menorah, right? That's there. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is the bread of life. Bread is something that we use for fellowship, not only to sustain our bodies. I mean, that's very important as well, but also for fellowship. We break bread together. When you break bread with somebody, it means that you're on pretty good terms with them if you're willing to sit down and have a meal with them. Right. So that's definitely part of it. So God is inviting us to come in to be part of his presence, right? He wants to have fellowship, a relationship with us. But because of our decomposing flesh, we can't go too close without there being major consequences. And so that is why all of this apparatus had to happen. And we see in the New Jerusalem that currently there is a temple. Right? How do I know that? Well, Isaiah chapter 6, it tells us that there is a temple there. We know in Revelation, it talks about how there's a temple in the New Jerusalem currently. But then in Revelation chapter 21, it says that the temple is no longer found because the issue of sin and the judgments that are going to come during the tribulation, those will finally be meted out. And then there will no longer be a need for God to really veil himself from his creation so as not to destroy it, because the heavens and earth are going to be restored at that time. So he says, you shall make a screen for the door of the tabernacle woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen made by a weaver. And you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, and you shall cast 5 sockets of bronze for them. All right, chapter 27, right? You shall make an altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. You shall make its horn on its 4 corners. Its horn shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. Also, you shall make its pans to receive its ashes, and its shovels, and its basins, its forks, and its fire pans. You shall make all utensils of bronze. Now, did you see that when the closer that you get to God, you need gold, and then as you get further away, you need silver, and then bronze. Well, obviously, these are more expensive on the one hand, but if you're in God's presence, you really need something that's going to stand the test of time, something that will not decompose, and that is gold. And you get further away, you can use lesser metals for these lesser requirements, if you will. So you shall make it a grate for it, a network of bronze, and on the network you shall make 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. You shall put it under the rim of the altar beneath, that the network may be midway up the altar. And you shall make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with bronze. The poles shall be in the rings, and the poles shall be on the 2 sides of the altar to bear it. You shall make it hollow with boards, as it was shown to you on the mountain, so they shall make it. You shall also make the court of the tabernacle. For the south side there shall be hangings for the court made of fine woven linen, 100 cubits long on one side. And its 20 pillars, and their 20 sockets shall be bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands shall be silver. Likewise, along the length of the north side there shall be hangings 100 cubits long. Its 20 pillars and their 20 sockets of bronze, and the hooks of the pillars and their bands of silver. All right, so again, these are just some very practical things that have to happen for this thing to be interlocking and for it to be transportable, etc. And along the width of the court on the west side shall be hangings of 50 cubits with their 10 pillars and their 10 sockets. The width of the court on the east side shall be 50 cubits. The hangings on one side of the gate shall be 15 cubits, with their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. And on the other side shall be hangings of 15 cubits, with their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. For the gate of the court there shall be a screen 20 cubits long, woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen made by a weaver. It shall have 4 pillars and 4 sockets. All the pillars around the court shall have bands of silver. Their hooks shall be of silver, and their sockets of bronze. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, the width 50 throughout, and the height 5 cubits, made of fine woven linen, and its sockets of bronze. All the utensil of the tabernacle, for all its service, all its pegs, and all the pegs of the court shall be bronze. And you shall command the children of Israel that they bring you pure oil of pressed olives for the light, to cause the lamp to burn continually. In the tabernacle of meeting outside the veil, which is before the testimony, Aaron and his sons shall tend it from evening until morning before the Lord. It shall be a statute forever to their generations on behalf of the children of Israel. So you're going to keep the light burning. Now, of course, when we celebrate Hanukkah, right, it's the celebration that, oh my goodness, the lights went out, and then they had to get oil ready, and then the lights came back on, right? So that's the festival of lights, because the light is always supposed to be burning in the tabernacle. That, of course, is a picture of Yeshua, right? He is the light of the world. And so this is what they would have had for those times. Now, again, a lot of details, but there's beauty in the details. And when we think about the tabernacle, this is something that God designed so that he could be with us. I kind of think of it like little David, the boy in the bubble, right? So there was this boy back in the 60s who had this immune deficiency syndrome. It wasn't AIDS, but it was something of a similar nature, as far as I know. And he was so deficient in having any kind of immunity that if he were exposed to just people, right, then he would die. And so he had to live in a bubble. And his poor parents, I can sense the sorrow that they would have had, that they could not go and hug and kiss and play and caress with their little boy, but they had to interact with him through a bubble. Can you imagine the pain that would have caused? The sorrow, thinking, I just can't kiss my child or I'll kill him. And I think that's the same kind of sorrow that God probably had at some point. Maybe I don't know. I can't speak too much for God, but he created Adam and Eve to have fellowship with us, and then Adam and Eve, ate of the forbidden fruit. That then caused degeneration, decay, death to enter into them. And so then if he gets too close to his own kids, he kills them. That's essentially the problem for little David's parents. If they get too close and they don't have this barrier protecting them, they're dead, right? So David was the one, little David, the boy in the bubble, was the one who had to live in the holy space. But in the Bible, it's just the opposite. All of us are living outside, and God decides to live in this holy space so that he can be close to us. And he kind of reaches out to touch us through this plastic sleeve, if you will, to try to get close to us. But he can't just come to us fully exposed, or we die. And that's the divine dilemma. And of course, Jesus had to come and offer his blood, not only for my personal sins. Yes, he did that. But he also gave his blood to redeem the very planet. I want to take a look really quick before we end in Romans chapter 8, looking at verse 19. Because it says that the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pains together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. So the earth, the creation, the elements, are waiting. All these things are waiting for their redemption. So there's corruption, decay in the very dirt itself. Don't believe me? Well, don't do any maintenance on your house for a while. See what happens, right? Don't believe me? Go over a bridge that hasn't been maintained. You might regret it. There's all kinds of examples of things that if we don't maintain them, they fall apart. The only things that have really stood the test of time are the pyramids. They've done quite well, but that's another story. So we have to maintain because everything is falling apart. And if God gets too close, well, what happens? Well, we know exactly what happens when God gets too close to the planet. And when he came down on Mount Sinai, it started to burn and smoke. When Jesus comes back, we read about this in Second Peter. Second Peter chapter 3. We're going to go to verse 10. All right, so, but the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. So right here, the heavens passing away, that is the veil between heaven and earth passing away. And when that happens, Jesus is coming. And when he's coming as the fiery God that he is, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up, right? So that's what happens when the veil, when that plastic bubble is taken away, as it were, then this planet in its current state is going to start burning up, melting. Now, it's not going to just turn to goo and, go away, right? So it doesn't do that, but, pretty much the topsoil will start to burn, right? It's not going to burn all the way down to the core of the earth or something like that. Thankfully. All right. So anyway, but that's what happens when God comes outside of his bubble, outside of his temple, and he interacts with this decaying, degenerate earth. And that's what happens when we get too close to him. So all of that was a temporary stopgap measure until the fullness of time when the Messiah should come, and he paid the redemption price so that we could be saved, so that the earth could be saved, so that the animals could be saved. I'm not saying they all go to heaven, but I'm saying that anything living needs to be redeemed. So God had to have the big reset button, and that came at a tremendous cost, which was the cross, right? And so, of course, he did that, and we are so incredibly grateful. And I'm grateful that we will not need a temple or tabernacle forever. That was simply a temporary measure. And now it says that we are the temple of God. God wants to dwell in me, and he wants to dwell in you, right? Well, much more could be said about that, but we're going to leave that there for now. Thank you guys for joining me. This, as always, is a privilege to come to you. Oh, there went my my background, right? Anyway, it's always a privilege. So I'm glad that you could join me. Until next time, God bless you, and always stay in the Word. And I hope you'll join me tomorrow night for